We're in the midst of a huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, and I'm the Partnerships and Community Manager here at AllVoices, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today, I'm really excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Dr. Serena Huang. She is the Global Head of People Analytics at PayPal. Dr. Serena Huang, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture. If you want to share a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, how did you answer the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Thank you so much for having me, Christina. It's great to be on. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the show. My pronouns are she, her. And wow, this is a tough question. I was all over the place as a child. So anywhere from ballerina to airplane pilot, I never made up my mind. And now I'm in a field that didn't even exist when I was growing up. So how about that?
Yes, absolutely. I can definitely relate to that. I have been in fields and I'm in one right now that I didn't know it would exist, 20 years ago. What is a kind of value or characteristic that you really you think is important to teammates or coworkers that you work with?
Oh, great question. Something I always look for is a sense of curiosity and perhaps more importantly, intellectual humility. That's something I definitely look for in interviews when I look for new team members to join my team or when I'm on a panel for others in the organization. I see so much value in staying curious because you might have heard this phrase, right? The 7 most expensive words in the business is this is how we've always done it. So, so someone who has intellectual humility will be able to revisit how they've done it in the past and continue to find new ways of doing things and improve and get better. So this also involves learning, right? Whether it's reading articles, books, taking online courses, staying curious and intellectual humility are really important to me.
I think curiosity and intellectual humility are also really important. So +1. And speaking of your team and fast forwarding to the work you're doing right now, for folks who aren't familiar, what does a global people analytics team and like folks who are working with you mean? And what kind of data are you looking at as well?
Definitely. So in people analytics, we help our business leaders and HR leaders make better decisions with data when it comes to people. So we look after employees over the entire life cycle from hiring all the way to exit and everything in between. So if you take hiring, for example, one of the data points we look at is how long does it take to hire for different roles? And that might sound really simple. I'll share a bit on how that helps the business. So for example, if you know a role takes, let's say 30 days to hire and another role may take 60 days to hire, from a planning perspective, it's very helpful to know how long it takes when someone leaves to replace them. If you're going to scale up your team, let's say you're in growth mode and you need 30 more developers, if I'm able to tell you it takes 30 days versus 90 days, that makes a huge difference in your planning process. So as far as looking at data, that's how we help the business make better decisions. And it's not simply backwards looking, it's a lot of forward looking as well in the planning example I just provided.
Yeah, I think that example is interesting and also really helping the business make insight-driven decisions to make things more efficient and make things work a little bit better as well. I know from your experience as well, you've worked at large corporations too, like Kraft Heinz Company, and PayPal is a large organization too. How do you think about breaking down that feedback from such a large kind of sample set, if you will?
Yes, indeed. So for listening to employees, we leverage anything from surveys to focus groups to get a sense of how employees are feeling and where they need support, especially during the pandemic. Like many companies, we've started to ramp up how we listen to employees and focusing on really timely topics. In my mind, a survey that is well designed is one of the most strategic things an HR organization can do. Having the voice from employees help you understand where they need support. So with a lot of data coming in for tens of thousands of employees, something that we often do is sentiment analysis, right? breaking down the comments on whether something is positive, negative, or neutral, help us understand how they're feeling on certain topics. So that's one way to approach employee listening with data analytics. Certainly, employees are now much more willing to comment, and with tens of thousands of comments, it's really difficult to use only human eyes to digest what employees are saying. So this is where data analytics play a role. Like I said, sentiment analysis is a great example, and of course, that's a method that's leveraged in other fields like customer analytics as well.
It sounds like you do a lot of employee listening through a variety of different touch points with employees. And like you said, now employees are really apt to give feedback that's positive, negative, and everything in between. I want to ask, how do you see this culture of employee trust and listening really manifesting at the organization in terms of impact?
Oh, great question. I think they go hand in hand. So without trust, if employees don't trust the organization, they are much less likely going to provide feedback because they don't believe either actions will be taken or that something bad might be happening to them if they provided feedback. So having that trust is really important. And I see organizations able to provide trust and increase trust over time by telling employees that they are heard and also taking action on the feedback. So those are really important. And like I said, I think they go hand in hand.
Can you give an example of a kind of change that was made because of the data or decision at the company that has been made because of the data you analyzed, whether it was surprising or not, as well?
Indeed. So when it comes to whether or not something is surprising, there's a whole interesting change management skill set that we need to approach something that's surprising. I will share maybe a couple examples back to the hiring because it's so important to what we do as an organization. We started to notice in parts of the organization, the time to hire was a bit higher than expected. So we started to look at the entire funnel of hiring from when candidate apply all the way to hiring to see how long each stage was taking them. And then we realized there were some approvals that were taking a really long time. So we took actions to remove some of the approvals to speed up the process after full analysis on what is truly needed to get to the offer and get someone to join the organization much faster. So I'll share that one example. And then the other in the employee listening space, there's a lot of great survey data that are just under leveraged. If you think about exit surveys, for example, that employee fill out on the way out, there's a lot of good nuggets that can be helpful to the organization, right? And if you think about why people say they leave, and some of the comments they additionally provide, it's usually not so simple. Someone might say, I'm leaving because of better opportunity. Well, what does that mean, right? How do we use that information to change our policies, our strategy to make it better so that others will be willing to stay in the organization? So that's one that's really helpful to, again, design better questions to dig deeper into why someone might be leaving. And then even identify moments prior, like employee attrition is a very complicated topic. Often it's not one incident, right? Often it is death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Maybe you had a bad experience, maybe it's not an inspiring conversation with someone, and then over time you get to a point where you decide to leave the organization. So I think certainly the exit interview survey data holistically can give you signals on where we're doing well and where we can potentially do more to retain talent. But then also, if you listen to employees more frequently, then you can get signals along the way on whether it's support from the manager that they're getting or not getting, collaboration with peers becoming maybe more difficult in the pandemic. And then getting those signals over time can help you find ways to remove those obstacles and make the employee experience much better.
Yeah, and when we're talking about the employee experience too, it sounds like through the examples you've been giving as well, it's from the candidate experience when they're potential employees to when they're fully at PayPal to even the exit interview kind of surveys too, in terms of what people wish was there or why they're leaving. I think that whole kind of cycle is really important. And I would be remiss if we didn't bring up kind of financial wellness too, in terms of PayPal's mission and the industry that PayPal is in as well. So I do want to ask, how does PayPal support the financial wellness of employees? How do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. So as a fintech company, of course, financial health is really important for us and for our employees. A few years ago, we did an analysis and found that for our hourly employees, even though we were paying market wages, some of them were still really struggling. So we made it a goal to improve financial health for our employees by doing a few things. One, certainly raising wages for our employees was something that we did pretty immediately. On top of that, we started offering financial education. So think about budgeting and help with that, courses that people can take. We even offer one-on-one coaching for employees who want to take up on that, so that they can get better in thinking about questions like, how do I reduce my debt, including student loans? How do I save more? That has been tremendously helpful. So it's really core to us as a company, and we're glad that we're able to help our own employees.
That's something that I wish that I took in high school around budgeting and just
Right.
figuring out my financial wellness. So I think that's
Right.
a really important resources to offer employees as well, in addition to the wage raises that you were talking about too. And one of the things that you kind of talked about at the top of our conversation was, you never want to say, well, this is how things have always been done, and business as usual is going to continue. You want innovation, and you want to try different things and ask for that employee feedback. But even with the best intention, sometimes people make mistakes. So not necessarily at PayPal or really any of the companies you worked at as well, but maybe just in the world, in the industry at large. What are some common mistakes you've seen people make when they're trying to collect employee feedback from their employees and do kind of people analytics themselves?
Hmm. I would say the two biggest mistakes I've seen are, one, not collect feedback at all because they're afraid of bad news or not being able to do something with the information. And two, gathering a lot of feedback and doing nothing with it. I would say those are the two biggest mistakes I've seen. So, not on number one, if you are afraid of the news, then that's a very different problem to solve. I often coach our leaders. A simple question is, would you rather know? That's it. If you would rather know, then ask. And then once you ask, do something with it. It's that simple, really, from data to actions eventually. Because then, if you don't take actions, employees will never feel an impact on you doing something with the feedback. And then what happens is then they stop sharing because they don't feel like you're going to do anything with their comments and taking the time and filling out something for you. So those are the two areas I have seen.
I feel like it is a snowball effect as well, because if the team doesn't trust, the manager, like whoever is collecting
Right.
feedback for the company too, they're not going to give it in the first place. And then if you get over kind of that first step of building that trust and saying, okay, like I think my voice will be heard, but then nothing is done, they're going to go back to not giving feedback at all. So I
Right.
definitely agree with that too. Again, for folks who aren't in the field or in the team of just like collecting this information, analyzing it as well, what is the hardest part of your job?
Oh, hardest part of my job. I do think it is getting people to take actions on data. Sometimes we refer to that as the last mile problem. We often spend a lot of time, my whole team, on analysis. And once we present the insights and what we have done and recommendations, at times we run into leaders who are reluctant to take action on those insights. So back to our earlier point on whether or not something's surprising, sometimes it's because it's a surprise. So it just takes more time to digest, and being able to deliver the message in a way that will resonate with the leader is really important. The other part is understanding the business well enough to make the right recommendations. So just because the data says something, you still need the business context, right? Something that could have worked in other organizations may not work in yours. And the business continues to evolve. Outside of the pandemic, of course, we're in a fast growing industry and every day something new is on the market. So being able to understand the business really well to make a recommendation based on data that will resonate with the business is really important. I think we continue to learn and try to coach my team members on learn the business, and this is where it becomes really important.
This people data is really important to the business. People are one of the best resources a company can have as well, and making sure that you're synthesizing it and creating it in a way that is related to the strategic imperatives of the business is really, really important. What is something that you are looking forward to seeing in the people space? I guess another way of asking it is what's giving you hope, or what are you excited for?
I think in the employee experience space, we have so many opportunities. In addition to employee listening, I see the hyper personalization continue to grow. Definitely for a lot of employees who may have unique challenges in working virtually, and how does that work in the future? So this is where feedback becomes really important, and how can we create a truly flexible work environment that is tailored to employees based on their personalized needs. And that could change from time to time, right? Maybe maybe today you have different needs than you did last week because your world is different. So being able to tailor to that, I think the hyper personalization in employee experience is going to be really exciting in the next few years, for sure. And as we come out of the pandemic, to see how companies use data analytics to help create a strategy that works for them in the future.
Absolutely. A super dynamic strategy, always changing. People are really complicated. So I think having
Yeah,
experience and having that two-way conversation is always really important, and something that I'm looking forward to as well, as we're continuing to talk more about mental health in,
mm,
with the workspace,
indeed.
so recognizing the fullness of, a person's life outside of work as well. Is there any,
Definitely.
yeah,
Christina, I think that's one of the benefits that I've seen in the pandemic is that it's now much more okay to talk about mental health. There is still stigma, of course, that exists, but it is now much more widespread as a conversation that we can have even in the workplace.
absolutely. I think it is kind of a silver lining and a bright spot. A lot of people are putting
Yes,
time on their calendar as well and making it public,
right.
especially managers can see that for their teams too, to model that behavior. Is there anything that you kind of want to share with our audience that I didn't ask you, or maybe 1 to 2 key takeaways you hope listeners bring with them after hearing our conversation here today about you and your journey to this work?
Yeah, I think there's so many opportunities in people analytics, and the field is growing and changing quickly. So I definitely encourage those who have some interest in the intersection of data analytics and people to explore the field. There are lots of interesting online courses that you can take to see if this is something you want to do for the next phase of your career. And then for anyone who is currently in the field, definitely stay curious, continue to explore and finding ways to solve problems.
Mhm. I bet there's never a dull day in your work. There's always something to solve and a lot of data to get from employees as well. Thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture. I enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me, Christina.
Absolutely. And as a reminder for folks who are listening, AllVoices believes in that employee feedback management, and we know that it's a business imperative in order for the company to succeed to do that employee listening. We'll see you soon.